with you, Danny. Thank you.
Yes, pleasure is mine. Professor Sachs, let's get started. So, as you have probably noticed, the United States has gone to the brink of war with Iran. Now, Donald Trump has had choice words, even amid now talks of negotiations happening. I just want to play what he said in regards to how he is viewing negotiations and Iran's promise for all-out war if the U.S. attacks.
Wouldn't he say that? Of course he would say that, but we have the biggest, most powerful ships in the world over there, very close, a couple of days, and hopefully we'll make a deal. If we don't make a deal, then we'll find out whether or not he was right.
So more threats, Professor Sachs, from Donald Trump, even amid talks of negotiations, and Israel now is getting involved, and I know you have a lot of thoughts on this. Ahead of talks, Israel is setting red lines. Oh, actually, here we go. This always happens. Here we go. Ahead of talks, Israel has set red lines for Trump envoy Steve Witkoff, essentially saying that they must not, the United States, sideline the missile issue for Iran, the so-called proxies. So, Professor Sachs, what is your reaction to this? Are we on the brink of, and is this war inevitable? And how have you viewed this overall situation?
Well, no war is inevitable until it happens, but this war is likely. It is championed by Israel, and Israel runs American foreign policy in the Middle East. So it's interesting, Witkoff going to see Netanyahu before Witkoff meets with the Iranians is almost taking orders from Netanyahu. This is unfortunately how American politics works. Netanyahu has wanted a full-out American war against Iran for 30 years. And I mean literally 30 years. That's when Netanyahu first came to power. He came to power with a group of political advisors, American/Israeli political advisors from both countries that propounded something called the clean break policy for the Middle East. And the idea of the clean break is that Israel should dominate the Middle East. There should be a greater Israel, meaning that Israel controls all of what was Palestine under the British, not only the Israeli borders of the 4th of June, 1967, but the West Bank, Gaza, and so forth. And that to enforce the greater Israel, Israel and the United States should go to war with any country that objects to that. And since almost everybody in the region objects to that, that has meant war against almost everybody in the Middle East. There was a famous list of 7 countries targeted for war after 9/11, which was a U.S.-Israel list. And it included Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Iran, Somalia, Sudan, and Libya. And there have been wars with all of them, all Israel-provoked wars. The war with Iran has not culminated in regime change to this date. Iran is an ancient civilization, Persia. It is a country of nearly 100 million people. It's not a Lebanon or a Syria or a Sudan or a Libya or a Somalia that Mossad and the CIA and NATO or US or Israeli bombings can decide its fate. This is a major power that is not succumbing to Bibi's treatment. And so he's been after a big war with Iran for a long time. Trump is his puppet, and that's why a war like this is really possible. Trump is paid for by the Zionist lobby. He says it himself. It's not my saying it. He looks to Miriam Adelson. He looks to others to say, yeah, that's why I'm in power. You put me in power. And he's not very smart man, obviously. So this is why almost anything is possible. I think what's happening right now is that important countries are telling Mr. Trump, this is not a good idea. Maybe you don't know what you're doing. Maybe you think this is Venezuela and you're going to exfiltrate a leader or kidnap a leader or kill a leader. This is not Venezuela. This is not your backyard. This is not something that's going to go down well. I'm pretty sure he's hearing that from the Saudis. I'm pretty sure he's hearing that from Turkey. I suspect he's hearing that from President Putin. I don't know for a fact, but I would hope that he is, in fact, because that's the truth. And given that he is not very smart, doesn't know what he's doing, is surrounded by con men and gangsters and third-rate thinkers and strategists, somebody has to tell them, don't do this. This is really stepping on a landmine. This is really hitting a tripwire that could go very badly wrong. So I think that's where we are right now. We're close to war. We're close to an explosive situation. The Iranians have been trying for a dozen years plus, actually more than a dozen years. It's really 14 years at least to negotiate with the Americans. And of course, they succeeded in mutual success of the P5 plus Germany, the 6 countries signing an agreement with Iran that would have put the nuclear energy program under extremely tight scrutiny. It would have meant what Iran has always said. They don't want a path to nuclear weapons, and it would have stopped that. That was the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. It was negotiated. It was adopted. It was voted by the UN Security Council. So everything Trump claims that he wants, we already had. The UN Security Council voted Resolution 2231 10 years ago, which said, okay, no path to nuclear weapons, very tight International Atomic Energy Agency supervision. It would have done everything. But Trump, being Trump, both bought by the Zionist lobby and not being presidential in the slightest, ripped up the JCPOA in 2018. And that's where we are to this moment. So if you ask me what's going to happen, I can tell you what rationally should happen. And that is that Turkey and Russia and Saudi Arabia and other countries should be explaining to Mr. Trump, don't do this. But whether that is enough remains to be seen. And Netanyahu is no doubt in every possible way, and with all his friends and influencers and purchasers in the White House, telling Trump, pull the trigger, let's get it started. This is going to be the greatest thing since the Iraq War.
Yeah, well, you've mentioned the consequences globally that are being recognized. What are these consequences that the region and the world are recognizing with the possible war with Iran? Because many have who watch this program have speculated that the United States is plunging itself back into a major Middle East wars that could have far-reaching global implications, much farther than perhaps wars in the past. Even we're talking about World War, maybe consequences. What are your thoughts on these?
Wars are very unpredictable, and you don't know who is going to be making what kinds of decisions. Iran is within weeks of being able to develop nuclear weapons, I believe, with the 400 kilograms of enriched uranium. And if they want to, they could make a dash for nuclear weapons. I doubt that could be stopped in any way by any bombings or anything else. It's quite clear that everything Trump has said about the bombings last summer are just BS, because if indeed Iran's nuclear program had been stopped. Why the hell are we about to have a war now when Trump is saying no nuclear weapons is the big issue? Because what they did last summer didn't accomplish anything. Okay? So this is first point. This could go nuclear. I don't think the Iranians want that at all. I really don't. They've been spending the last 14 years to say we don't want that, but it could. And if they were attacked, it would surely change the discussion inside Iran between hardliners and softliners and all the rest. So that's one possible outcome. The second possible outcome is on the conventional side. It's clear, and again, I'm obviously not a military authority, but from what I have been able to understand of the events of last June, Iran demonstrated it can punch through Israeli air defenses. It did not aim for any very consequential targets last time, but if it chose to do so, it could do so because it has hypersonic missiles, because Israel's so-called Iron Dome is of limited efficacy. It's real, but it's of limited efficacy. Israel is a small, compact country, highly vulnerable to this kind of attack. And the idea that everything's predictable and you have one strike and Iran is crippled and can't strike back seems absurd. And I think the lesson of last summer is that it is absurd. Third point is obviously that Iran probably could close down the Straits of Hormuz and create a tremendous bottleneck in the international petroleum markets. We've been there before. It's actually where I started my economics work back in the 1970s, because I studied the macroeconomics of the two oil shocks of 1973 and 1979. Well, that would be something that would be a little bit perturbing to Mr. Trump, who, above anything in this whole world, loves the stock market and his personal wealth. And this, I can tell you categorically, would jeopardize all of that. And so Mr. Trump might not like to see the end of the American bubble in the stock market that could come with a major shock to the global oil industry. Another point is that Iran has friends. Iran is not isolated in this. And those friends are many. Some are nuclear armed. This is just the kind of thing that can absolutely lead to a disastrous cycle of escalation. Nobody can say that that's not possible. And when I think of who's in charge in the United States, I think that they are so poorly equipped to understand any of this that it's a bit terrifying.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask Professor Sachs, has the Trump administration at all heeded the lessons of just, what are we talking about, 6-7 months ago, where Iran did show that it had the capabilities. It was struck pretty hard, and it did have the capabilities to defend itself. Is the U.S. at all able to heed this? Because right now, what we see is, despite talks of talks, there's still a massive military buildup. The United States just held drills, I believe, in the Red Sea with Israel. And Trump administration just passed, I believe, and pushed through, of course, over Congress's head, $6 billion worth of weapons to Israel, ostensibly including these air defenses that the Wall Street Journal says they need so badly. What do you make of this?
Clearly, we have a very chaotic government in the United States. The president has a nanosecond attention span. He's not bright. He's impulsive. He's not able to understand these issues. We have amateur hour in our Department of War, so-called. we have a lot of instability in American politics right now because there's a war on the streets of Minnesota and Oregon and other cities around the United States. So none of this is a stable, rational process right now. And that is what makes it so unpredictable. People say that's Trump's style. I don't think it's style. I think it's his ignorance and impulsivity personally. It is what it is, though. It makes the situation fraught with danger and very unstable. And we should recall, of course, this is one of the central points, that when Iran was negotiating last summer in what were 5 rounds of negotiation, the 6th round was to take place in Oman on June 15th, 2025. And on June 12th, Israel bombed Iran, obviously with the US full support. So this means that even when you announce negotiations or you make statements about progress in diplomacy, with this government, it doesn't mean anything. Trump's hallmark is his word is meaningless. I think everybody is adjusted to that, although it's very hard to adjust to that. Usually when you hear a leader, whether you like what they say or not, you can use that statement meaningfully, but with Trump, you can't. I don't know what the Iranians do or don't understand of that. It's hard to say. They're very nice people. I've met them on several occasions. They have wanted diplomacy for years. The diplomacy has been met with a slug in the face. They still want diplomacy. I don't really know in this sense what they discern from all of this. What I discern from all of this is that it's a profoundly unstable moment. And the US word means nothing in this context, unfortunately. But what could matter is a kind of multilateral approach where countries that are obviously recognized by the United States to be very important for the United States, Turkey or Saudi Arabia or the Emirates, get into the act to basically create a framework that is not just bilateral and subject to the whim of Mr. Trump.
Yeah, and this time around, we've seen, I think Jordan, as we speak, came out also saying that they're not going to let their territory be used for a strike. Saudi Arabia, the UAE have done the same. This is different. Of course, the last attack was a surprise attack. Now that it's not so much of a surprise, we see the world reacting, I think, in a very different way, especially the region. And Professor Sachs, I wanted to ask you, though, about, given the, there's, as you said, the influence, the control, even if we might say, of U.S. foreign policy, of Israel, the lobby, etc. I don't know if you saw the latest Epstein file, document leak or dump that said through an FBI report that Trump is compromised by Israel and that Jared Kushner is the brains of his entire operation. I mean, what does this portend then? Because we all know that even though the U.S. obviously has had Iran in its crosshairs for quite some time, now you add this Israel element where Israel seems very desperate to attack Iran, have Iran attacked. What does this portend? What does it say also about the United States and its governance right now, given all these crises that are surrounding Trump and the United States as a whole?
Of course, the facts of the Epstein files show that this was a Mossad operation, a high-level Israeli operation that basically suborned a very significant part of the American political class, including Trump and including others. And Epstein's all over the place with the Ukrainians, with the Israelis, with the security issues. This was not some freelance pedophile. This is an operation of Mossad. And that's telling. of course, no one's telling the full story, but what we see is really quite amazing how much that this has implicated not only the US political class, but across Europe, across Norway, Britain, Poland, other places. It's all pretty stark. We need a little bit of transparency here. It's not good to have a president of the United States and other leading politicians suborned by this kind of sting operation. It again is probably part of the explanation of what has happened. Who killed Mr. Epstein? Who turned off the film at the last moment? Who knows what about all of this? This is what the last few weeks really raises, and these last few days of more files suggest this is not a foreign policy run on the surface the way that it pretends to be run. This is a network that is pretty deeply unpleasant, and its grips on American policymaking are rather stunning. And they have already gone to the extent of the genocide in Gaza, and now they could go to the extent of war with Iran. And God help us, they should not do so.
Yeah, and oftentimes, Professor Sachs, when we look at these dangerous escalations and this momentum now toward a U.S. war with Iran, we miss some of the forest from the trees or the trees from the forest. And I wanted to ask you about the implications of how Trump right now, and of course throughout his administration, has used the concept of even talks and negotiations as a weapon. Like, what are the implications of this? Because this is something that the Trump administration has almost made a hallmark of its foreign policy. The art of the deal actually being almost like the art of a kind of war that uses diplomacy to achieve U.S. objectives. What's your assessment of how this impacts the world at large?
The U.S. is at war in a lot of places. It's at war with Cuba right now. It's at war with Venezuela. It is at war with Iran. Some of it is open shooting. A lot of it is economic, sanctions, quarantines, and other means. One of the things that we have seen admitted about Iran by none other than the U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent in Davos just a few days ago is that the U.S. has been in economic war against Iran during the past year. Now, if you read the New York Times or the Washington Post, the absolutely failed mainstream media, you will get the impression that the corruption and mismanagement of the Iranian regime brought people out onto the streets and then led to their deaths and so forth. If you actually even listen to what our own Treasury Secretary has said, it's a completely different story. He said, I keep it nearby because I find it so extraordinary. He says, President Trump ordered Treasury and our Office of Foreign Asset Control to put maximum pressure on Iran. And it's worked, because in December, their economy collapsed. We saw a major bank go under. The central bank has started to print money. There is a dollar shortage. They are not able to get imports. And this is why the people took to the streets. So this is economic statecraft. No shots fired, and things are moving in a very positive way here, says Mr. Bessent. Positive. Destroying an economy, bringing people out onto the streets. It's positive because the game that's being played is regime change. And so things are working in a very positive way. He calls this economic statecraft. I would call it extortion, gangsterism, war by another means. And that's happening in many places in the world right now. So the U.S. is at war with a lot of the world. They're scared. A lot of the countries are scared. the U.S. can strangle other countries' currencies. The U.S. Has a way to bring down other countries' currencies through its sanctions regime, which basically says to banks all over the world, you cannot process transactions to Iran or to other countries. And so Iran cannot get paid for its actual exports. So this is underway. They're rather giddy about this, so that Mr. Besant sat on the stage in Davos and bragged about this so-called economic statecraft. I think it's horrifying. And I just wish the New York Times would even do one little story about it. This wasn't hidden. It doesn't take an investigative reporter. It just takes a smidgen of honesty.
Well, in 30 seconds, maybe Professor Sachs, if you could react to the fact that this caused thousands of people to be killed in Iran. So the what the United States did to try to strangle Iran, it's caused the death of thousands of people over time, and now thousands of people in just a few weeks. Your final reaction to what you see ahead, and what should be the actual approach that we should all be taking to this war?
Two things are needed. We need the grown-ups in this world, President Putin, President Erdogan, the leadership of Saudi Arabia and other countries, to say to Donald Trump, do not do this. This is the first thing. Second, we need the United Nations Security Council, which is charged with this, to stand up and do its responsibility and stop hiding. Get into session and tell the United States that under Article 2, Section 4 of the UN Charter, you cannot threaten the use of force. Not only not use force, but not even threaten the use of force. So this is what we need in the coming days. We need diplomacy, both at a bilateral or regional basis, by the countries that understand how disastrous the U.S. and Israeli approach are. And we need the UN to do its damn work, because that's what it's there for, is to say this is not acceptable. This kind of threat and bluster and bombings and assassinations and so-called economic statecraft. We need to put an end to this, because otherwise it's going to put an end to us.
The one and only Professor Jeffrey Sachs. Professor Sachs, thanks so much for joining me today. Look forward to the next time.
Great to be with you. Thanks so much.
Take care.